demand it. It's a necessary focus, and it's an efficient thing. Like it's, you know, everyone I was at a conference last week, and the big question was, is Chat GPT or artificial intelligence going to take my job? And the right response is, it won't. But someone that doesn't adopt technology, their role will be at risk with someone that understands technology. So it's just upskilling yourself on the next, you know, technology step.
On efficiency with AI, how big of an efficiency gain have you seen in your team since they've adopted things like Copilot, or are you still sort of yet to see that play through?
Well, you see it pretty quickly, looking at the bullet points from a 1 hour meeting. You know, it's an incredible step up in efficiency. I think we're still grappling with how we monetize it, and I think that's the challenge. I think it makes what we do more efficient and quicker, which is great for clients. I can't see people paying for that improved efficiency.
It's just expected.
It's expected, and that's we're in the service industry. So, I mean, the other part of that discussion is around how it improves our trading technology and how it makes us better at what we do around managing risk.
On that, do you think it will ever get to a point where your team are actually using AI to make decisions for clients, or will there always be a layer of human making that?
Oh, I'd say the latter, only because regulators are very focused on AI, understanding it, and having the appropriate overview of that technology. I mean, we have endless amounts of regulators around the world that we adhere to, and that's a very topical discussion around how regulators.
All of this speaks about the pace of decision making, of just everything that you and your team are, from however early in the morning right through to the market close in certain countries, right?
Yeah.
This also is representative in the news flow. Like what your team is having to absorb constantly, and the places it's coming from now. It's no longer probably just a Bloomberg terminal and coming through their screen from central banks and economic data. It's coming through X, right? How are you handling and navigating that, and what are you taking with or without grains of salt at this point?
Yeah, I think often your first reaction isn't, often your first reaction isn't the right reaction. It's an emotional reaction based on something you've seen. Is what you've seen accurate and verified? That's the other real focus, I think, on intelligence and the accuracy of it. So generally we'll need things verified before acting on them, particularly if a client's orders are involved. I mean, it's, you know, you're responsible for executing someone else's investment intentions. It needs to be done appropriately and with all the checks and balances in place. So we're not about to risk that on the sake of an X headline. Yeah.
When it comes to clients as well, I imagine now you're dealing with far bigger passive and also active firms that when they make a move on a market, it can be so market moving because of the size of them now. And if they're passive specifically, they're emotionless in a way. Whereas then on the other side of that coin, you have the retail investors who are often hyped up by that news and are very heavily relying on emotion. How have you viewed that structural change, and how are you navigating that?
It's fantastic.
You think it's a good thing?
Well, you need different emotions to make a market. If the whole universe was passive, it would be a VWAP order over 2 days into the month end or whatever it was. You need different investors, whether they're passive investors, active, hedge funds, quant funds, to provide liquidity. So I think it's like the business. We talk about diversity. You know, if we don't have a diverse business with a number of different risk buckets and everything's the same, we probably won't get much done. So I think the diversity of the client base, the different investment intentions, timelines, managing your own money versus someone else's, your different benchmark, it's all really important. So, you know, there's been huge swings in how funds are managed, like Australia and New Zealand, 2 great examples. You know, legislated super. So the funds under management is growing at a ridiculous rate. So the investable universe in Australia and New Zealand aren't big enough for the funds that are being, you know, it's like a fire hose. So you know, that's a good thing because it enables us to look at investment opportunities offshore, different investors, different drivers. So your passive investor, I don't think will have a problem.
On the passive investors, what's their desire around block trades? Because they are so big and they can be so market moving with the size of what they're purchasing or selling, do they have more of a desire to do deals with you and your team in private?
Oh, it depends heavily on the timeline, the intention, the outcome the clients want. It's, you know, we've got 6 different platforms you can execute an equity order on. So it depends on the commission you want to pay, the speed you want the trade executed, how big the trade is, how discreet you want to be. So as a 20% market share, you know, we're Swiss, so we're discreet to start with. You know, we can keep secrets better than anyone. If you want to move a decent line of liquidity, UBS, in my view, is the obvious house to go to, because it's hard to see a high volume trade when UBS is involved, when you're 20% market share. But again, some clients don't, that isn't relevant to them. So yeah, every client's different, which is a good thing. And the market is pretty deep and liquid, and there's a number of different ways you can execute an order. So if you need something done now in huge volume, that will involve what we call our facil desk, where we take principal risk. That's probably not the cheapest way to get it done, but it gets what you want done.
Well, say in that instance, if somebody does want to be discreet in an order and they effectively use one of your dark pool options, how is UBS then contributing to price discovery? How are you ensuring that there's the balance between executing what a client wants, perhaps in private, but also ensuring that there is like public price discovery for retail investors?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's rules around all of that. So every order we execute is within the rules that the ASX or NZX like stipulate. So that's absolutely, I'd say, microscopically overseen. So that's an easy answer. Yeah, that's not debatable.
UBS facilitated the largest block trade in New Zealand last year, the second sell down of the Auckland Council's $1.3 billion Auckland Airport stake. Mike introduced us to the guy handling those huge trades, and something about his name sounded familiar.
Tommy T, have you got a second?
A Kiwi!
Yeah, I know. Tom, this is Madison.
Nice to meet you,
Tom
Tom.
Tepper.
Tom's family hails from the Waikato. Now he's facilitating some of the most significant and secret stock trades in Australia. So what do you do here?
So we work on the equity side and sort of block trade transactions, which is large sort of blocks of stock. We source and negotiate them sort of privately, and try and put a little bit of commission in between it. Yeah.
Club the ticket, I like that.
Yeah.
What's the threshold in terms of size for something considered a block?
It'd be sort of $10 million or more than a day's average trading volume. But there's also sort of special situations, sensitive clients, sensitive situations that we get involved in as well.
Where someone wants to be more discreet.
Yeah, discreet, or like clients who where the transaction would be to cause too much market impact to be public. So that's sort of a material, non-public information kind of thing, like wall crossing you might hear. So we do that stuff as well.
So you have to keep a lot of secrets in your gig then?
A little bit. Yeah.
You're a vault.
Straight face.
Yeah, poker face.
Yeah. Very much.
Do you mind me asking how many of those trades you're doing a day? Like how high volume are trades of that size that can be market moving?
Australia's pretty unique, and that's a big thing. Like I was in Asia before this, and it's not a big thing to do these sort of transactions at price in large volumes. They sort of trade larger things in the market because there's more liquidity there. The market might see anywhere between sort of 5 and 10 smaller blocks a day, and then the large ones might be once a week or once a quarter or once a month.
And they're your favourites, I imagine?
They're the big ones, yeah. They're the ones that really matter, and you sort of have to get it done. Pretty. It's always competitive, so you have to do the right thing quickly and compete with all the other banks out there. Yeah.
Do you mind me asking the biggest block trade you've done?
About $262 million. Yeah. I was just
pressure
on the desk. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
How quickly did you facilitate that? Hours, days, weeks?
No, it was probably 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days. We work on it for a little while, and once you get some inertia and momentum, it happens pretty quickly.
While they execute the big end of town in here, the smaller trades could be the trickier ones to facilitate. Is that more difficult to kind of execute the right or good price for something like a small cap?
More difficult, but I think like
There's always a buyer and seller.
There's always a
right?
buyer
Yeah.
and seller, and there's less liquidity around small caps. But no, I don't think, like, we've got a dedicated small caps team, great analyst, a dedicated sales guy that covers that sector, and I think so does half a dozen other banks. So I think small caps, the other thing is, I guess if you're in small caps, you're looking instinctively for more significant moves in price, performance-wise. So I think investors in different sectors are pretty au fait with, the challenges or the price discovery. They may have to pay more commission. I don't think it's a challenge.
These big buyers and sellers, what is the information that they're paying most attention to? Is it something like earnings, or is it perhaps other things that they're watching to act upon?
Okay, well, firstly, it's the first thing I'd say that it's very much Trump-related tariffs, cross-border geopolitical, and then you'd move to outright sort of sector moves across the 27 odd sectors we cover in Australia. That gets a lot of focus, and then it narrows down to analytics around rebalances, and again, that's more sectors or which stocks are moving in and out of a sector and the impact that'll have on that index.
On just what you and your team do more generally, what do you think is like a common misconception that, say, a retail or street trader may have about what you're doing here?
A misconception? I think maybe we don't do many lunches anymore.
Anymore? That's something that's changed, to go back to the first question. That's a shame for you.
I think, as I said, I've been at UBS 31 years, and I think I'm probably working harder now than I ever have. So I think that's possibly changed in terms of people work very hard in this industry. It's if there's a misconception, there's a perception that they don't. That is hugely. I mean, that's the other thing that's changed in 30 years. I think people work harder now than they used to. Most colleagues have got partners at work. So I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in, people are generally working harder. It's still vibrant and very adrenaline-y. Like, there's still healthy discussions, let's say, and raised voices. Everyone's very focused on not making a mistake, which is natural, but I just think that, through the different economic and regulatory cycles we've had, there's far less tolerance, I suspect, in finance from a regulator's perspective as to behaviours, mistakes, multiple oversights, and that's a real focus of ours.
Well, that's kind of sums up that it makes it really tough to trade right now. Like, you have the pressure that you talk about, the eyes of regulators, also the pressure of not taking on too much risk, something that Credit Suisse has found out all too well in recent years. And then you have the vibrancy, as you say, the culture. Burnout, I mean, there's talk about this in the US, certainly Australia as well. I mean, why would somebody want to be a trader right now?
Well, I mean, traders only represent a small portion of our business.
The rest is research and assessment.
Oh, research and sales traders and advisory sales, and I'd say traders maybe represent 15 to 20% of our team. So I'd think balance. To your question, I'd say balance is important. Don't be defined by whatever you do, whether it's finance or marketing or advertising. It occupies quite a lot of your time, but I wouldn't be defined by your job. And I'd make sure you've got plenty outside of finance, if that's it. I mean, finance is, I would say, an amazing career to get involved in. I'd do it again, without a doubt. The middle of our 5 kids is interested in it, and I think she'd be great at it. So I'm very supportive of that. And there's probably 40 jobs on our trading floor. So it's very variable, and we move people through different roles all over the world. So it's pretty cool. I worked in London 4 years. It was the best 4 years of my working career. I'd encourage everyone to travel. And young people coming in the industry now are very confident around moving roles. 30 years ago, that was not the case. And the industry and management support that. So, yeah, I think the industry is better now for people to get involved in than it ever has been, frankly.
Given that so much has changed and technology is changing from here so rapidly, especially with AI, what would you recommend somebody wanting to get into finance do? Where do they begin? And is CFA even the correct kind of piece of paper to get now?
Yeah, it's a good question because we run pretty aggressive cadet and grad programs. So we've got young kids coming straight out of year 12 as cadets, which is pretty daunting. We see a whole range of, I think something computer literate is pretty helpful. So, you know, engineers, something that involves thinking. So engineering is problem solving. It involves math. I think that's pretty attractive. You know, we have a lot of commerce graduates, business, your traditional accountants, business, commerce. But I think something with some bent around technology is helpful and open solution thinking.
Can't say I'd ever do it, but I'll give you a call if I ever change my mind, Mike. Although I'd probably fit in. The average age in here is the same as me, 29. And UBS is investing in its dealers, building a bigger trading floor in a new building right next door.
March 23, we moved here as an interim 4-year step to moving into the new tower next door. So they're building a new tower that will sit next to this. We're taking 7 or 8 floors in that.
Wow.
That will be cool. That'll be really cool.
We'll have to come back and film that,
Mate,
please.
You should see the plans. It's exciting. So, yeah, if I was at uni and I was seeing the plans for the new dealing room, I'd want to work here.
As we let him get back to it, his team gave us this exit. Why you were clapping? I'm told this is what happens if you strike a big deal. So probably the first and last time I'll experience that. Thanks for watching Markets with Madison. If you enjoyed this interview, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. I do all of the research for these episodes myself, so your support means a lot. I always love to hear your feedback and ideas, so please drop any thoughts in the comments below. Now go put your money to work.
So let's get started, and I like to start with this slide because if you could pill up what vigorous intensity exercise does, it would be the biggest anti-aging blockbuster out there. So when I say vigorous intensity exercise, what I'm talking about here is the kind of exercise that you do and you can't really have a conversation while you're doing it. You're really putting in some hard effort. So you're really not able to talk while you're doing that kind of exercise. If you wear a heart rate monitor, it's the kind of exercise where you're about 80% your max heart rate or greater. That's the kind of exercise that when I say vigorous intensity, that's what I'm talking about today. And I want to start by talking about cardiorespiratory fitness. So cardiorespiratory fitness is often measured by something called VO2 max. You've probably heard of this. VO2 max is really just the maximal amount of oxygen that you can take up during maximal exercise. Cardiorespiratory fitness has really become a very, very important biomarker of our health span and lifespan. So there have been countless studies now, and this study I'm showing you here is showing, it's stratifying people based on their cardiorespiratory fitness and their life expectancy. And what the data shows is that people that have a low cardiorespiratory fitness, if they can move anywhere above that low, even to a low normal, they're still low, but they're on the low normal range. That's associated with a 2-year increase in life expectancy. And if you compare people from the low to the high, that's about a 5-year increase in life expectancy. And there have been other studies that have actually analyzed if you can improve your VO2 max, your cardiorespiratory fitness, for each unit that you improve it. So a unit is actually 1 milliliter per kilogram per minute. That is associated with a 45-day extension in life expectancy. So for each unit you go up and you increase it, that's 45 days added to your lifespan. Why is VO2 max important? I mean, if you think about VO2 max, your cardiorespiratory fitness, it's, we're talking about measuring it when we're doing maximal exercise, but really, everything we do relies on our cardiorespiratory fitness, even just sitting still. Just to sit still and breathe, it takes about 3 milliliters per kilogram per minute of oxygen. When I'm just having a conversation, like me up here on stage talking to you guys, that takes about 11 milliliters of per kilogram body weight per minute of oxygen, right? So as we're aging, we start with our cardiorespiratory fitness, and there's things we can do to get high, right? And that's where we want to be. But as we're aging, we kind of head towards this cliff. We're going down. Our cardiorespiratory fitness declines with age. And so you want to really bank in all you can and improve your cardiorespiratory fitness early on, because you want to be higher up, because you will reach that cliff. You just want to reach it at a later time point, right? There was a study that was published a few years back in JAMA, and I really like this study because it showed that there really didn't seem to be an upper limit in the benefits for improving cardiorespiratory fitness. So people that were at like the elite, the top 2%, the elite level for their cardiorespiratory fitness, they had a 80% lower all-cause mortality than people that were low cardiorespiratory fitness. Not a big surprise. But even people that had a high cardiorespiratory fitness, we're talking like the top 0.25% of the participants, the elite people still had a 20% lower all-cause mortality compared to those people with a high. I mean, these are healthy people, a high cardiorespiratory fitness. But what was so fascinating about this study was that researchers looked at biomarkers that could predict mortality. And so they looked at things like type 2 diabetes, smoking, cardiovascular disease. These things, of course, predicted a lower life expectancy, right? A higher all-cause mortality. However, a low cardiorespiratory fitness actually predicted better. So in fact, people with a low cardiorespiratory fitness had a lower life expectancy than even people with type 2 diabetes or even people smoking. So in other words, having a low cardiorespiratory fitness was like smoking in terms of life expectancy. And people don't think about that. We think about all these diseases. We talk a lot about type 2 diabetes. We talk a lot about, cardiovascular disease, how terrible it is for your health, how bad smoking is. But nobody's talking about how terrible being sedentary is, not being physically active. It is a disease, and it should be treated as a disease. We really need to think about our cardiorespiratory fitness. We need to think about how important it is we're supposed to be moving and improving that cardiorespiratory fitness. So how do we improve it? Endurance aerobic exercise is one of the best ways to improve cardiorespiratory fitness. However, vigorous intensity exercise is actually better. And we know this because there have been multiple studies and there have been meta-analyses of these studies looking at people that actually do the physical activity requirements, the guidelines that are out there. So this is about 2.5 hours per week of moderate intensity physical activity. So this is the type of exercise that you do that's aerobic, and you can kind of have you can talk while you're doing it, but you're very breathy. So you're really not at that intense level where you're pushing really hard, but you're getting physical activity. About 40% of people doing that 2.5 hours per week cannot improve their cardiorespiratory fitness. They're so-called non-responders, unless they engage in vigorous intensity exercise, particularly high intensity interval training. So that's the kind of exercise where you're doing short bouts, intervals of high intensity. So it could be anywhere from 20 seconds long to 30, maybe a minute long interval where you're going hard, and then you have a period of recovery. When those individuals that did not respond to just normal moderate intensity exercise engage in high intensity interval training, they're able to improve their cardiorespiratory fitness. And it's thought the reason for that is because, cardiorespiratory fitness, you're transporting oxygen, you're breathing it in, your lungs are taking it in, and then your vascular system is transporting it to other tissues like the muscle, the brain, right? It's thought that the harder the stress that you're putting the greater the adaptation. So your body is responding to a greater amount of stress when you're going harder, when you're working out harder. There's a variety of protocols out there that have been shown to actually improve cardiorespiratory fitness. I like to talk about probably one of the hardest ones. It's called the Norwegian 4x4. The reason it's called that is because the Norwegian ski team uses it as part of their training protocol. And what it is you, for 4 minutes, this is a 4-minute interval where you're going as hard as you can, not all out, as hard as you can, and maintain for that entire 4 minutes. And it takes a little bit of trial and error to figure out what that intensity is. It's gonna be hard, but you're not going all out. That would be impossible. And then you do light exercise, very, very light exercise. You let your heart rate go down and recover for 3 minutes, and you do that 4 times. So it's 4x4. And this protocol has been shown in countless studies to improve VO2 max. Now, there's other ways to improve your cardiorespiratory fitness. You can do a 1 minute on, 1 minute off, even 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. I mean, whatever works for you. I think the most important thing here is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do on a weekly basis? What are you going to be able to do? What do you like to do? That's the most important. You don't necessarily have to do the 4x4. I do this once a week. I think it's great if you can, but you don't necessarily have to. If you haven't gotten a VO2 max test, like that's where you go into a lab and you wear one of those masks, you get on a treadmill or on a stationary bike and you're doing 15 minutes of running as fast as you can for that entire 15 minutes. Pretty brutal if anyone's done it. You can estimate your own VO2 max actually by using any type of wearable device that tracks your distance and your heart rate. And so it's called the 12-minute run test. And basically what you're doing is you're running for 12 minutes on a flat surface. It has to be flat. And you're calculating your distance. And there's an equation you can look up called the Cooper test, the Cooper equation, and it'll help you it'll estimate your VO2 max essentially. And that's a pretty good way to do that. I want to take a minute here. We're going to talk about that Norwegian 4x4 again as part of this protocol that was done by Dr. Ben Levine at UT Southwest in Dallas. He's probably one of the world's leading experts in cardiovascular exercise, cardiologist, exercise physiology. He studies how the heart ages and how we can reverse that aging through different lifestyle strategies and also what accelerates that aging as well. So he's looking at both ends of the spectrum. And just generally speaking, what happens to our heart as we age? Well, a lot of things. I'm not going to spend hours discussing that. You probably have other people here talking about that. But generally speaking, as we age, our heart shrinks and it gets stiffer. It's stiffer with age. And that's not a very good thing for cardiovascular health. You want your heart to be flexible. You want to be able to respond to stressful situations. You don't want your heart to be stiffer. And so what Ben set out to do was try to see if he could reverse some of this shrinking and stiffening of the heart in people that are middle age. So they're 50-year-olds that didn't have any identifiable diseases other than the fact that they were sedentary. So they had one disease, as I just mentioned. Being sedentary is a disease. But they didn't have any other diseases. They just weren't physically active. And he separated these 50-year-olds into 2 groups, one with the treatment group, one with the sham control group. The treatment group underwent a 2-year pretty intense exercise training protocol, where at the end of the 2 years, they were exercising for about 5 hours a week. A large portion of that was vigorous intensity exercise. They were doing the Norwegian 4x4 once a week, but they didn't start out there. It was a progressive workup, right? You can't just take someone that's not ever worked out in the gym and then start them on the 4x4 and doing 5 hours a week, right? So they progressively worked up to that point. The sham control was kind of like yoga-ish stretching, enough where they thought they were getting a treatment, but it wasn't actually the treatment. After this 2 years of exercise, they measured their hearts. Of course, they measured up baseline, and their hearts grew and became more flexible. so much that it was reversed about 20 years of aging. So their heart actually looked like a 30-year-old heart rather than a 50-year-old heart. This was after 2 years of this intense exercise training protocol. And I love this study because it really shows, one, that it's never too late. And these were 50-year-olds, they're in middle age. And two, that you really have control of the way your heart ages, right? I mean, this is pretty, I would say, unbelievable that you can actually, after just 2 years of really putting in effort, reverse the aging of your heart by about 20 years. The control group, I mean, they didn't have any of this, by the way. I mean, yoga's great, but it just isn't going to reverse the structural aging changes in your heart.
Most businesses that look easy to buy will destroy your bank account. I'm David. I run a boring air filter company that makes $23 million a month, and every day I buy or invest in boring businesses to build my empire. These are my favorite businesses to buy or start. Throughout this video, I'll also share some of the most dangerous businesses that I would never touch. Before we get into the good stuff, I need to warn you about the businesses that will absolutely wreck you. And ironically, these are the ones that every YouTube video tells you to buy. E-commerce brands are the worst business opportunity you can buy. I see people buying e-commerce brands every day thinking that they've found a shortcut. The pitch sounds perfect. Existing revenue, customers already buying, no validation needed. I saw this in filter buy world in air purifier manufacturers. Like during COVID, there was a ton of demand for air purifiers because everybody wanted to purify their air. Then by 2023, all of the revenues were declining and people were trying to sell these businesses. And I actually know somebody who ended up buying one and realized he had bought a big lemon because these e-commerce businesses are hard, maybe some revenue, but oftentimes there's a lot of inventory risk or manufacturing risk or overseas supplier risk. It's a lot more complicated than oftentimes meets the eye. Whereas a lot of these e-commerce businesses are purely marketing driven. They're basically buying something from overseas, but what happens when the algorithm changes? What happens when the cost per click skyrockets? My verdict, F tier. If you're buying a business, you want businesses that are protected. E-commerce brands rarely have any protection at all. Next one hits close to home because I almost bought one of these early on. Iman Ghatzi ran a creative agency and built a business teaching other people how to do the same. What's funny is that he made more money telling people to create an agency than with the agency itself. Every week, someone tries to sell me their agency with established clients and proven systems. They show you the client roster, their recurring revenue, and case studies, and it all looks solid on paper. But when you dig into it, you realize inevitably that they have one or two large clients that have a very high chance of churning. But it makes it easy for people to sign up, also makes it easy for them to churn and to go somewhere else if they're getting better service somewhere else, or if they think they're going to get better service somewhere else. Someone else could replicate this in 6 months with a laptop and LinkedIn. Most agencies haven't built sustainable moats. They're just selling time and relationships. The knowledge walks out the door with the previous owner. You want to buy businesses that are protected. My verdict, F tier. I have a terrible story about this next business that still makes me angry. My brother dropped $50,000 on a franchise without telling me. Here's what happened. He bought a hazmat remediation franchise, disaster cleanup, hoarder houses, death scene cleanups. At first, I thought it could be actually an interesting business model, but the franchise ruins it. He put in a $50,000 fee and the franchise takes margins off the top, capturing the vast majority of the upside. It's not very sellable because you don't own the systems. The franchisor controls when and who you can sell to. Eventually, my brother realized he was competing with local operators who have lower cost structures while the franchisor keeps taking his cut. Compare this to a Chick-fil-A or McDonald's. They block competition in your area, you actually own that territory. Most franchises don't have that brand power. Here's the flip side. I met an Uber driver in New York City who's about to buy a Domino's franchise. And I had this Uber driver who picked us up in a Rivian. I was asking this guy, I was like, a Rivian is a pretty expensive car and you're driving in New York City. What made you decide to buy this car? I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. What he was really doing was preparing to buy a Domino's franchise. And I thought, that's interesting. He had gone in and worked with a family member who had done it before. He spent like 3 years working in the Domino's franchise, went to all their training, learned how to operate it, learned everything about the economics. And in this 15-minute Uber ride, this guy was able to walk me through the exact economics of a Domino's franchise. He knew exactly where he wanted it to be, what type of customer base he was going to be looking for, what his profit margins were going to be, how he was going to finance it. He's basically de-risked himself by going out, studying an established system, going through all the training so that he knows he can operate that system. So my verdict, C tier. The same franchise can be A tier with 4 years of experience or F tier without. And I think that Uber driver actually will make it an A tier for himself. Now, this next business looks easy, but I learned the hard way that it's a trap. This is why you should never buy this type of business. I'm talking about landscaping companies. They look safe, local customers, recurring weekly revenue, and simple operations. But here's the reality. People can switch landscaping companies very quickly. It's extremely easy for customers to just hire the next guy who knocks on their door. Buying one of these businesses is especially hard. Even with a non-compete, the person you buy from can still compete with you. This is where I got burned. We bought an HVAC service business in South Florida where, we lost $4.5 million effectively. One aspect of that I did not fully understand was that non-competes oftentimes are not really that enforceable. So even if you do have a non-compete in place, which we did in that case, it doesn't mean that it's easy or really realistic to enforce. Starting to offer competing services once they actually sold us the business. But here's the paradox. If a landscaping company has real value, a strong edge, customer density, systems, private equity will come in and pay a premium to buy that business. As a normal person, you're not going to find a good deal on these businesses because private equity has boxed you out. If you can afford it, it's probably not good enough. If it's good enough, you probably can't afford it. My verdict, F tier. Avoid unless you have insider knowledge. If you're as obsessed with boring businesses as I am, subscribe to watch my new podcast, Boring Money, where I interview owners of businesses you'd never think to run. If you want to come on the show, click on the link in the description. Now, if I see one more tweet about laundromat passive income, I'm going to lose it. This famous business idea is so overrated that people are losing thousands of dollars because of it. The pitch, I see it almost every day, is seductive. Buy some machines, collect quarters, print money while you sleep. I love it. I used to dream of doing this. When you dig into the realities of these, you realize it's a lot more complicated than YouTube likes to tell you. What happens when those machines break? You got to go pay somebody to replace that. It's a lot more expensive. Oftentimes that's not included in the P&L that you see. A lot of times people are hiding it. It's really like some person who's good as a handyman themselves, and they go and they do this themselves. So it's oftentimes more of a job than a cash cow than meets the eye. But we want businesses with a stable customer base and good cash flow without needing lots of reinvestment. And by the way, those two things go hand in hand. Like, you don't have good cash flow if it needs constant reinvestment. That cash flow is with the money that you're getting after the reinvestment that you need to maintain and grow that business. My verdict, C tier. They can absolutely work. Like, you can be successful in these businesses, but you're competing with everyone who read the same Twitter thread now. Pallet recycling. I know, you're thinking, what the hell? But stay with me. Boring B2B services have better moats than any consumer business. Nobody, except for maybe me, but nobody dreams about forklift maintenance or pallet repair. And that's exactly the point. Pallet repair and recycling are surprisingly big businesses. I actually hired someone who worked for a big pallet recycling company, and it actually, for a while, entertained the idea of getting into it. And so if you see these painted blue pallets going down the interstate, if you open your eyes, you probably will see them. That's coming from one of these pallet recycling companies. Somebody who's actually figured out how to collect these pallets and basically resell them to people that need them. I like these because you get a sticky customer base that's very difficult to build. It's local and fragmented, so you're not worried about the big competitors. So my verdict, B+. They're tricky to operate and you need to know what you're doing, but they can be great businesses. This is a great business idea that anyone can start and make money from, but no one is talking about it. Don't start a restaurant, start a refrigeration business. Here's what makes it actually easy. Restaurants and stores can't afford downtime. When their cooler breaks, they need it fixed immediately, like that day or that hour. So commercial refrigeration businesses can charge a premium to store produce. If you're the one that they call, you've got real pricing power. A restaurant loses thousands per hour when the cooler dies. But there's a catch. You need to look for long-term customer relationships and good maintenance managers who understand service delivery. Industrial services have a compliance component and recurring need. My verdict, it's a B+. A stable business you can grow, but tricky to operate without knowing what you're doing. Now we're going to get into the real money. Businesses that combine everything that we've talked about: moats, cash flow, and nobody's competing for them. A private equity firm is quietly buying bookkeeping practices and using AI, and you can steal their playbook. Bookkeeping sounds boring, and that's exactly the opportunity nobody else sees. There's a PE firm I know that's consolidating them and using AI to make them more efficient. I've actually been seeing this happening in a lot of different industries, and I think that this is one of the best business ideas out there. But it's going to take owning or really understanding an industry really deeply first. But I actually know somebody personally that's doing this in accounting practices. And what they've basically done is they've gone in and they bought one or two small accounting practices, and then they are systematizing how these practices work using AI. And so ultimately what they're going to be able to do is have a system that then as they go out and buy other accounting practices, they're going to be able to use their AI to make them a lot more efficient. That means having a lot fewer accountants per customer and offering the same or higher level of service. And here's what makes it easy. You have labor needs, but no physical needs, which means that they are going to cash flow really well. There's no inventory to manage, no equipment breaking down, no machines depreciating, just service delivery. And with AI, you're making that service delivery more consistent and easier to scale. And that's the trick. I think 10 years ago, this is a lot harder to scale, kind of similar to the agency model business where that's hard to scale. But accountants aren't going away. People still need to be compliant. They need to file their taxes, and you need to provide that expertise, but you can use AI to help you do that at a scale that you never could before. The key is finding businesses that are local with an established book of business. That book of business would take you forever to build from scratch. What I would be doing would be going in and saying, okay, I'm going to buy this out, maybe with some cash up front and then a buyout over a couple years from the owner of this practice, and say, okay, in this next couple of years, your job is to help me to systematize what you have going on in your business, and I'm going to build the systems that are going to make this repeatable so that when we go out and buy other accounting practices, we're going to be able to integrate them much quicker. So my verdict here is A tier. Find any local business with established customer relationships and cash flows, then you found something that's worth buying. Commercial insurance agencies are another cash cow that most people walk right past. They can become great cash cows that are very sticky if you know what you're doing. It's the exact same playbook as bookkeeping. Local businesses with an established book that can take forever to build from scratch. Think about it. Try cold calling 100 businesses to sell insurance. Now, imagine buying an agency where those same 100 businesses have renewed for 5 straight years. And there are no physical needs here, so your cash flow can transition easily. My verdict, A tier. Labor-only professional service with recurring revenue and established relationships. Almost nobody talks about this one, but it's a home run. If my kids wanted to be millionaires, I would tell them to perfectly understand this dirty job. Nobody wakes up excited about grease traps, but that's why this is a perfect business. Every restaurant has grease traps, and they're legally required to clean them. Septic services are something where if you can buy an existing one and build on top of it, I find that way better than starting from scratch. I love service businesses that are fairly simple and don't need a ton of specialty training. What I look for are with established customer customer relationships and cash flows, then you found something that's worth buying. Commercial insurance agencies are another cash cow that most people walk right past. They can become great cash cows that are very sticky if you know what you're doing. It's the exact same playbook as bookkeeping. Local businesses with an established book that can take forever to build from scratch. Think about it. Try cold calling 100 businesses to sell insurance. Now, imagine buying an agency where those same 100 businesses have renewed for 5 straight years. And there are no physical needs here, so your cash flow can transition easily. My verdict, A tier, labor-only professional service with recurring revenue and established relationships. Almost nobody talks about this one, but it's a home run. If my kids wanted to be millionaires, I would tell them to perfectly understand this dirty job. Nobody wakes up excited about grease traps, but that's why this is a perfect business. Every restaurant has grease traps and they're legally required to clean them. Septic services are something where if you can buy an existing one and build on top of it, I find that way better than starting from scratch. I love service businesses that are fairly simple and don't need a ton of specialty training. What I look for are local businesses offering a service, preferably with an emergency or compliance need, that also has an existing customer base and a way to deliver. You don't need to be a master plumber to run this. You can hire people for manual labor and manage them. So, my verdict, S tier. I'd look for water filtration, grease trap, or septic services. Services that don't have as much bigger company competition coming after them. I'll pay you maybe $50,000 and then I'll work for you for free for a year and negotiate some type of an owner buyout, on the business. Like you're going to start buying them out and then get any growth from that business and kind of work as an apprentice with them to learn that business. Now the final S tier business reveals the entire framework for what you should be looking for. This is one of the most profitable businesses that you can buy, but no one is talking about it. Buildings need fire and backflow inspections by law every year like clockwork. Fire and backflow inspection services are compliance driven with recurring revenue. At FilterBuy in 2015, we actually had a fire and I lost $1 million or so. At that time was basically everything to me. I basically lost it in a fire and we had insurance, but we did not get the full insurance payout because we were not fully compliant with something that I did not even realize we had to be compliant with. I realized that it's a huge business. And so we actually pay somebody at FilterBuy at each of our plants to come in, make sure that the fire extinguishers are in the right places, that they're working, they're replaced when they need to be replaced. It's not something that anybody's going and looking at again. It's not something that gets flagged on a yearly budgeting review. So if I wanted to buy one of these businesses, I would look for owner-operated businesses where someone understood what they were doing enough to build it, but didn't know how to professionalize it. So my verdict for this is S tier. I'd look for local services that don't have as much bigger company competition. Now, if you're serious about buying S-tier businesses, subscribe. This is part 1 on my 2-part series about buying a boring business in 2026.
Surgiu uma dívida gigantesca de 7 milhões. Sabe o que eles falavam na época? Sem eu, a empresa vai falir.
Vixe.
Ele falava isso pra mim. Eu assumia os 7 milhões de dívidas. Eu tive uma vida gastava R$2.000 para passar o mês.
Por que o chinês vem pro Brasil?
Primeira coisa que é importante, que lá na China, tudo que você faz, tem outra pessoa para fazer. Todos os países têm menos população, então menos concorrência. China é um dos países que mais trabalha. Então ele tem que ir para os países que o pessoal não quer saber de trabalhar. Nessa linha a gente entrou faz pouco tempo, mas esse pouco tempo a gente virou um dos maiores do Brasil.
Eu percebo, quando a gente vai na Aparecida, tem muitos produtos parecidos. Você trabalha com o pessoal de lá?
Todos eles são meus clientes.
Todos? Caramba.
Todos.
Isso explica muita coisa.
Todos.
Legal, bacana demais.
100%. O nosso produto dá 100% na Aparecida, 100%.
Sejam bem-vindos a mais um Bastidores do Lucro, a tríade na sua empresa. E hoje a gente está aqui na PLB para entender como o Paulo conseguiu construir um prédio de 9 andares aqui no Brás, saindo do quase nada. Aliás, do absoluto nada, sem nem falar português. Tenho certeza que você já conhece ele das redes sociais, os vídeos que ele faz bombam demais.
Meu pai saiu da próprio país quando eu tinha, acho que 8 meses de idade. E aí...
Isso chama abandono, né?
Não é abandono. Porque ele tá...
Na China é trabalho.
O que você procura na vaga?
12 horas por dia. 12 dias por semana. 12 minutos de almoço. 12 reais por dia.
E cachorro? Você também tá moço?
Só que além de um grande influencer, ele é um grande empresário. O Paulo tem uma mente empreendedora incrível e viu no Brasil a oportunidade de colocar foco para crescer o seu negócio. Vamos ver se deu certo? Bora lá, bora! Fala um pouquinho da sua trajetória, o que você veio para cá, quando você veio?
Eu veio aqui no Brasil em 2002, na época, meu pai conseguiu o documento EME. Meu pai falou, se todo mundo vai ganhar, então eu vou chamar minha esposa, meus filhos aqui no Brasil para ter o documento, aproveitando, né? Se de repente, futuramente, aqui surge um negócio. Meu pai, na época, era camelô, né? Vendia as coisas na rua por muitos anos. Aqui no Brás, aqui do lado. Sabe essa feirinha de madrugada?
Sim.
Meu pai trabalhava lá, antigamente, lá na 25, na rua. Na rua, estendendo aquela lona azul e vendendo, assim. E ainda, o que ele fazia na época? Ele levava uma mala de mercadoria, ia porta a porta, tipo, vendendo por funcionários de estabelecimento. Teve muita, assim, o dono, na época, do restaurante, estacionamento, ele teve até a dó, sabe?
Sim.
Tava eu, criancinha de 5 anos, e meu pai, com uma mala de mercadorias. Aí ele falava, não, vem aqui dentro, não sei o que, pode vender. Meu pai vendia isso. E um dia inteiro, ele, tipo assim, ele consegue tirar 100 reais.
De lucro no dia.
De lucro no dia.
Certo.
Aí ele achava máximo, né? No início, meu pai, ele comia, tipo assim, um pão de forma, entendeu? Para passar lá o dia inteiro. Na época, pra gente, o mais luxo é um PF.
Um PF.
No almoço. E pra mim, nossa, ter um bife, não sei o que, era maravilhosa. E isso passou muitos anos. Meu pai conseguiu juntar um dinheiro e abriu o primeiro negócio lá na 25 de março, onde que eu tava. Poucos tempos depois, ele conseguiu crescer. Aí começou a causar problema a própria família. Minha irmã, meu cunhado, minha mãe trabalhava aqui. Todo o dinheiro que entrava, eu usava, gastava junto. Tipo assim, eles não sabem diferenciar o BJ.
O bem da empresa com o bem da pessoa física.
Exatamente. Com isso surgiu uma dívida gigantesca. De 7 milhões. Eu tinha 19 anos. Quando meu pai falou assim, Paulo, você precisa casar. Aí eu casei com o Lulu, mas assim, não tinha nenhuma obrigação. Eu amo o Lulu até hoje. É uma maravilhosa que eu encontrei ela. Depois que eu casei, minha irmã saíram fora. Meu cunhado saíram fora. Sabe o que eles falavam na época? Sem eu, a empresa vai falir.
Vixe.
Ele falava isso pra mim. Eu falei assim, não, eu não vou discutir com você. Eu não vou. Eu vou apresentar pra você quem eu sou. Durante muitos anos de luta, eu assumia os 7 milhões de dívidas. Assim, na época, eu tive uma vida de... Gastava 2 mil reais para passar o mês. Um mês com a família toda. Eu não tava pensando assim, talvez eu vou ser milionário, você não sei o que. Não. Eu falei assim, eu não tenho opção. Ou eu me dedico, porque eu já tinha um filho. Meu filho acabou de nascer, né? E meu pai só tem eu agora. Se eu vou andar na frente, talvez eu veja uma possibilidade para mim, para meu futuro. Se eu ando para trás, eu vou perder tudo. Entendeu? Lá tinha dívida? Tinha, mas pelo menos tem uma empresa. Existe uma coisa ainda, entendeu? Não é zero. Depois de 3 anos, assim, aconteceu uma oportunidade. A pandemia. Teve muita gente que tinha medo, escondeu, viajou para a China, então abriu uma oportunidade para a gente. E eu estava destacando. E sabe, na época que eu falava uma coisa que acho que é muito assustador, eu falo assim, eu já tô pobre. Se o meu tempo vai chegar na época, beleza, pelo menos meu filho vai estar bem sucedido. Então eu falo, eu vou trabalhar, lutava, nós todo dia trabalhando o máximo de tempo possível. Eu ganhei meu primeiro milhão na época. E depois de lá eu comecei a aprender, assim, a pandemia vai acabar. E depois que a pandemia acaba,
Qual vai ser seu diferencial?
qual é o meu diferencial? O que eu posso fazer? Na época tive uma moda de todo mundo entrava no Shopee, Marketplace para vender as coisas, produtos no internet. Eu não tenho esse tempo para fazer isso. Eu tenho que fazer alguma coisa diferente. E outra coisa, quando todo mundo faz isso, isso é uma concorrência danada. Eu não vou fazer. Eu vou ser diferencial. Eu quero ser uma influência. Eu já tive um sonho de ser influencer desde a minha infância. Eu me dediquei muito, na época, no começo, eu tive muita vergonha também, pô, e não sei o que eu fazia, mas testava, começou a dar certo, entendeu? Deus abençoa as pessoas que fazem coisa certa. Eu já fui no SBT, fui no Record, fui em vários lugares, já ainda dei uma gravação com o canal Achismo, né?
Legal.
O pessoal gostou muito de mim. Hoje o meu faturamento subiu mais de 500%. Na época eu vendia, nossa, o que eu vendia de um dia, lá é tipo uma venda de 3 semanas.
Nossa.
A Tríade tem garantia, viu?
Hoje você tem uma indústria na China, correto?
Tenho.
E que momento que surgiu?
Eu trabalhava com os produtos que não seja um produto exclusivo. Aí eu falei assim, não dá, isso não tem um fim. Eu preciso fazer algo diferenciado que ninguém pode ter isso. Eu comecei a investir na minha fábrica, na época, pesados, milhões. Perdi muito dinheiro no início, é óbvio. Aí, mas assim, testando muitas mercadorias e deu certo. Hoje a gente tem uma estrutura muito com sólidas lá na China, né? Então, hoje os nossos produtos, acho que uns 35% produto é importado na nossa própria fábrica, tá? Mas esse 35% de produto apresenta mais de 65% de vendas.
Entendi.
Do faturamento.
Entendi. Legal.
É isso que faz a diferencial.
Qual que é a diferença a nível de empreender lá e empreender aqui? Por que o chinês vem para o Brasil?
Primeira coisa que é importante, que lá na China tem mais de 1,4 bilhão de pessoas.
É gente, hein?
Tá? É muita gente. E aí, tudo que você faz, tem outra pessoa para fazer. A pessoa pode tomar decisão. Ah, não, eu não quero viajar para fora, eu quero fazer meu negócio aqui dentro. É difícil? É. Mas você consegue ser dedicado? Se consegue, você vai ganhar um dinheiro? Vai. Quanto? Não sei. Aí muita gente, ele já desiste no começo. Assim, cara, a China tá tão assim, meu. Aí eu acho que não dá, não é pra mim. Eu vou procurar oportunidade. Querer sair não é só o Brasil, para os Estados Unidos, pra Inglaterra, pra Tailândia, entendeu?
Sim.
Vietnã, tem muito chinês, tipo assim, ele vai por qualquer país.
Onde tem oportunidade.
Exatamente. Por que eles foram para outros países? Porque todos os países têm menos população, então menos concorrência. E, assim, China é um dos países que o pessoal que mais trabalha. Então, ele tem que ir para os países que o pessoal não quer saber de trabalhar.
Entendi.
Meu. E aí, ele vai surgir oportunidade para ele. Ele fala assim, aqui eu só preciso me esforçar mais, aí eu vou ter uma oportunidade. Porque lá na China, além de você esforçar, você tem que ser mais inteligente, porque o chinês tem que ser esforçado.
A concorrência é muito maior.
A Tríade tem garantia, viu?
Vamos conhecer um pouco a operação? Pode mostrar um pouquinho pra gente?
Pode, bora. Vamos lá.
Paulo, bora lá conhecer?
Bora.
Beleza?
Mas assim, primeiro eu tenho que apresentar aqui, ó. Esse prédio tem um total de 9 andares, tá? É um prédio gigantesco. Vamos mostrar a nossa operação?
Bora lá.
Qual é a minha intenção na época, né? Eu queria criar tipo um atacado de nível de facilidade de supermercado. Então, minha caixa hoje é totalmente de supermercado.
Total.
Né? E as compras que eu comprei, tudo é de supermercado. Então, pessoal, ele tem muita facilidade, né, de escolher o produto. Todos eles têm código de barra com descrição do certinho.
Você queria criar um local legal para o cara atacadista vir aqui, né?
Exatamente.
Um lugar bonito.
Porque tem gente que eles não gostam de conversar. Eles só queriam fazer a compra deles, só que a maioria dos atacados, das 25, todos mais, é tipo assim, uma caixinha no chão, não tem preço nenhuma, caixinha velha, e a pessoa fica perguntando preço toda hora. Tem pessoa que é mais tímidos, que não gosta de perguntar, então eu queria criar um tipo...
Conforto, né?
Conforto, lógico.
E hoje, dos produtos que você tem, o que tá saindo mais, assim?
Hoje está saindo mais a nosso aço inoxidável, né? É o nosso carro-chefe, né? A gente vende muito. Hoje a gente trabalha com anel tedeira, tem de festa, tem religioso, tem de signo, tem de outras coisas, entendeu? Tem com strass. Então hoje, olha, vem um paletão inteiro de anel tedeira. E temos alianças também, né? De todos os modelos, né? Isso também sai da nossa fábrica. A gente também tem outros setores, né? Pingentes, né? De aço inoxidável, pulseira de aço inoxidável, bracelete de aço inoxidável. Todos os produtos são aço inoxidável, não enverruja, não fica preta, antialérgico. E além disso, a gente tem outro setor nossa, né? Que é produtos de artigos religiosos. Também são um dos focos nossos, né?
Sim.
Que a gente tem a própria fabricação também. A gente tem diversos produtos. Tem um terço, né, de carrapinha. E nessa linha a gente entrou faz pouco tempo, mas esse pouco tempo a gente virou um dos maiores do Brasil.
Eu percebo, quando a gente vai na Aparecida, tem muitos produtos parecidos. Você trabalha com o pessoal de lá?
Todos eles são meu cliente.
Todos? Caramba!
Todos.
Ah, isso explica muita coisa.
Todos.
Legal, bacana demais.
100%. O nosso produto dá 100% na Aparecida, 100%.
Você não tem problema de vender porque não é uma religião sua, né?
Não é.
Isso eu acho legal.
Sim, eu acho que assim, primeira coisa, eu não posso vender um produto dentro da minha religião, porque a religião não se vende.
Claro.
Entendeu? É uma coisa proteger, mas uma coisa de mental, entendeu? Então eu acho que isso é, pra mim, eu acho que é proibido, né? Nesse andar, é um andar, sabe, é mais de emoção, sabe? Porque a gente iniciou com isso. Meu pai começou a vender os produtos femininos, entendeu? Então a gente preparou um andar inteiro só de produtos femininos.
Sim.
É a história da PLB aqui.
A história da PLB.
Caramba.
Na verdade, na época nem existia PLB ainda. Entendeu? Aí quando eu entrei, eu criei o PLB. Eu tô dedicando o marketing, o pessoal começou a entender que lá não é mais a Mirage porta-andar, é PLB importadora. Então a gente tem diversos produtos, né? Femininos, infantis, acessórios de maquiagem, né? Acessório feminino de cabelos. Trabalhamos com chaveirinhos também.
Ballerina cappuccina.
Pensa assim, Paulo, você tem um foco muito no B2B, né? Mas com essa pulverização que você teve, acabou caindo muito o consumidor final também, né?
Sim.
E aí o pessoal vem aqui às vezes querer comprar de unidade, como é que é?
Então, hoje em dia, tem muitas pessoas que vêm aqui, eles compram uma peça assim.
Sim.
Um pacotinho. Mas a gente vende assim, pacotinho. Não necessariamente você tem que pegar, não ser uma caixa inteira. Não. A gente vende meio que atacarejo.
Entendi.
Atacado, mas meio varejo.
Entendi.
Entendeu? A gente aceita a pessoa comprar R$100, R$200, 50. Chegamos no nosso andar de nosso central de administração da PLB Importador e também é nosso e-commerce.
Certo.
Né? Toda a operação de e-commerce vai acontecer aqui dentro, né? Hoje em dia as pessoas, a gente tem o próprio fundo aqui, separado as mercadorias. O pessoal, eles puxam o carrinho e começam a fazer a separação dos pedidos que caíram no site, né? Hoje deixa todas bem organizadas, com facilidade. E aqui tem um ar-condicionado, a pessoa trabalha aqui sem passar berrenque, sem passar calor. A tríade tem garantia, viu? Preciso te mostrar mais um andar, vem cá. Chegamos no nosso andar segredo. Por que segredo? Porque aqui que ele estoca as mercadorias. Então todas as mercadorias que vem aqui, a gente estoca aqui, né? Para ser a separação. E o pessoal pode comprar aqui, não tem problema de faltar mercadoria, né? Inclusive hoje a gente tem 2 estoques, uma para receber container, outro para armazenar e fazer a separação. E olha só o detalhe, tá? Isso é luxo. O estoque com ar-condicionado. A minha intenção é sempre trazer melhor conforto para os nossos colaboradores, entendeu? Trabalhar aqui sem passar perrengue, entendeu? Então a gente investiu, né, no lazer, né? das pessoas que trabalham aqui.
Obrigado por ter recebido a gente aqui, cara.
Imagina, que isso, tamo junto. Mano.
Demais,
Somos
Paulo.
parceiros, que isso.
Eu acho que hoje a gente conseguiu entender como uma pessoa veio com uma mentalidade diferente e encontrou um país onde essa mentalidade às vezes não é premiada, mas se você tem foco, consegue ter os objetivos.
Com certeza.
Conte com a tríade aí nos próximos passos da vida.
Tamo junto, velho. Tamo junto.
Bora, Paulo.
Valeu,
Valeu,
obrigado. A tríade tem garantia, viu? Não deixa eu correr aqui. Fica à vontade aí, pode gravar onde você quiser, tá? Tá liberado.
Obrigado.
Espero que você tenha gostado desse episódio. Você viu aí como o Paulo é fora da curva, né, Murilo?
Sim, um cara com uma mente totalmente diferenciada que veio no Brasil para fazer dinheiro. É disso que a gente precisa aqui.
Então, cara, deixa o like, compartilha esse vídeo com outros empresários aí, com quem gosta do Paulo.
Se inscreve, ativa o sininho, bota nos comentários quem que a gente pode visitar da próxima vez. E é isso. Valeu, até mais.
E vem pra tríade.
E vem pra tríade.
Bora.
Are 2 shorter bike rides in one day better than 1 longer ride? Do you even need the long ride at all? It's time to find out. And I'll be honest with you, I rarely find time for a long ride, run, or anything like that these days. Just work, family, life, the usual, everything that comes with it. You know the deal. But despite all of that, I still find myself being optimistically ambitious when it comes to my sporting challenges and endeavours. Some would probably say idiotic, but I do want to stay fit. I really like being competitive. So whilst I don't have these larger chunks of time to play with, I do quite often find myself with these smaller pockets of time, sort of 20, 30 minutes, which from a training perspective is pointless, surely. Or is it? Because doing split days, training twice a day on one sport, isn't some hack or workaround. It's actually what the best athletes in the world have been doing for decades. Elite swimmers, cyclists, runners, they will frequently do 2, sometimes 3 sessions a day as standard. They figured out a long time ago that frequency builds fitness. The question is just whether it works for the rest of us too. And here's the thing, I didn't plan this, I kind of stumbled into this one completely by accident. I realised that I was always holding out for this magical, mythical, longer ride that really I didn't have time for. So instead, I decided to commit to my shorter commute to and from work. So I plan to do sort of 2 to 3 commutes a week, 20 to 25 minutes to and from, up and over some pretty punchy hills. Nothing glamorous, no epic mileage, just a practical way to get to and from work. But I'm competitive by nature, and so I started pushing things, particularly on my commute home. I just started hammering the climbs, going as hard as I possibly could, chasing times, just kind of seeing what I could get out of myself. And after a few months, something quite cool, something quite interesting happened. I started to see that on one of the key climbs, the longer climbs on my ride home, my numbers were climbing noticeably. I was hitting numbers I hadn't seen in a long time. But here's the bit that really got my attention. I started running really well, over 5K specifically, and I wasn't doing really any running training at all. So what's going on here? Do you need the long ride at all? And can these small pockets of time, even just 20, 30 minutes that we normally just dismiss and don't bother about, actually help to move the needle? Okay, so whilst my experience was interesting, I will admit I was actually just doing something rather than nothing. It wasn't like I'd been doing long rides and then decided to replace them. But still, I was impressed by the results nonetheless, and it has sparked me to research this further and make this video, in fact. One particular PubMed study showed that when total weekly training volume was matched, short frequent sessions and longer, less frequent sessions produced similar training adaptations across strength and cardiovascular measures. Whilst another had 14 male endurance athletes perform either 1 long session of 6 intervals or 2 shorter sessions of 3 intervals each, separated by 6.5 hours of recovery, with the identical total volume intensity across both. The results were genuinely interesting. In the single long session, heart rate, blood lactate and perceived effort all increased significantly from the first half to the second half. In the two shorter sessions, the opposite happened. Actually, the heart rate and blood lactate actually decreased in the second session compared to the first. And crucially, on recovery, the single long session was associated with higher heart rate in the recovery period after, higher session RPE and higher training load score. The following morning, athletes actually reported high levels of fatigue and muscle soreness after that single long session. So the conclusion, the longer session may actually provide slightly higher overall training stimulus, but at the cost of significantly more fatigue and stress on the body. But what we do need to consider is that as triathletes, the bike is just one of three disciplines. That recovery advantage is arguably more important than squeezing out extra stimulus from one ride.
But before you cancel the long ride from your training plans forever, let's take a look at the other side of this argument, because the long ride absolutely does have a case to make. No interval session, no commute, no turbo workout can replicate what happens to your body after 3, 4 or 5 hours in the saddle. Your fueling strategy matters. Your position might start to hurt. Your mind starts to negotiate with you. And it's important that you learn this before race day. Now, if you're training for a 70.3 or a full Ironman, this long ride isn't optional. This is the opportunity for you to find out what works for you, when to eat, what happens to your body or how it responds when you run out of glycogen stores and you've still got an hour to go. I'll probably try, but this isn't something you can rehearse over a short 20-minute commute over a hill. And there's also something the science doesn't easily measure, knowing you've done the long rides. That confidence going into race day, knowing that you've been there before, you've done this. It's not nothing. I think we all knew we need to keep the long ride in the plan if we're training for a 70.3 or a full Ironman. But what if we're training for a sprint or Olympic distance triathlon? Well, at these distances, we're only going to be racing for a maximum of 2, maybe 3 hours. Raw speed, power, and ability to push hard off the bike matters far more than pure endurance. We don't need to be doing 4, 5, or 6 hours in the saddle to train for a 40-kilometre bike ride. You need intensity, you need quality, something that 2 shorter bike rides could deliver. But something we do need to consider when it comes to these split days is the mental toll. Obviously, I don't mind my commute because, well, it's kind of essential, but splitting training across 2 sessions can mean that you have a second workout hanging over you all day. I definitely felt that back in the day when I was an athlete with more time on my hands. So after all of that, the science, the studies, and my own accidental experiment, here's what I've landed on. Consistency beats heroism. Shorter, more frequent workouts do seem to trump the longer, less frequent workouts. Obviously taking into account the caveat of racing 70.3 or Ironman and the need for the long ride. But still, there is something for everyone here. Previously, had I only had 20 or 30 minutes available in the morning or evening, I may have done nothing. Now, I realise that it is very valuable and useful training time. A lot can actually be gained there, in fact. I'd love to hear from you guys, whether you do make use of those 20 or 30 minute pockets of time. Have you toyed around with splitting your longer rides, or are you like I had, sort of hanging on, hoping you're going to get that magical, mythical long ride in on a weekend and it never really comes? I'd love to hear from you guys. I've actually done a previous video on running and splitting longer runs over 2 shorter ones. Do make sure you go check that out, and that's really interesting, obviously, in terms of the impact forces. There are so many nuances in this. In particular, I could have gone in today talking around glycogen depletion in the second workout, and there's a lot of studies into that, but maybe that's a topic for another day. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Please do give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and I'll see you next time.
Olá, esse é o Por Dentro.